This is Hannibal here from the Hannibal TV on YouTube with my weekly review of the points I find interesting in Dave Meltzer's Wrestling Observer newsletter. Tammy Sitch, aka WWE Hall of Famer Sonny, who is now 52, serving a 17-year prison sentence due to killing someone while driving while impaired, had an appeal to try and get her sentence cut back, and she was denied. In other news, Jesse Ventura, despite them not really advertising him for tomorrow night's Saturday night main event, NBC WWE taping in San Antonio, he has confirmed he's going to be there. There hasn't been much of interest plugged for Saturday night's main event. I guess the main thing is Hulk Hogan is coming back. They're not saying what he's doing, but it'll be his first time appearing for WWE since the Raw on Netflix debut, where he was booed. Again, he was just coming out to basically plug Netflix and the beer. Maybe if they actually have him do something this time that's actually entertaining. Maybe that. I mean, the promo was still good as far as beer promo because it was shorter than some of the longer promos that night on for the Raw on Netflix. But still, overall, it was just a beer promo. He said, "Is what you gonna do?" That we've all heard a million times, but which we all love hearing. But I mean, give him something a bit better than that. Mick Foley says he's another WWE Hall of Famer, says he's now 280 pounds and would do the Royal Rumble this year if asked. Ric Flair is back doing WWE interview appearances, maybe under some type of Legends contract, but that is still unknown. But he's doing appearances for their A&E shows and for the network. But so likely he's probably under some type of deal with them. Steve Austin recently had knee replacement surgery after long time knee issues. SmackDown in Toronto. I mean, there hasn't been any wrestling events in Canada there hasn't been any AEW events since last July. WWE hasn't come since Survivor Series to Vancouver in November. They're coming to Toronto 2 nights in a row. It's their only other Canadian dates announced anytime soon. The Friday night SmackDown in Toronto is at 7,989 tickets. Elimination Chamber at the almost 70,000 seat Skydome the next day only has 26,000 tickets out for what's being billed as John Cena's last WWE appearance in Toronto. WWE SmackDown in San Diego, California last Friday had 10,846 fans. Raw in Dallas, Texas this past Monday had 14,157 fans. WWE is now officially working with TNA. They have announced an alliance. TNA had their largest attended show in a long time with their Genesis pay-per-view last weekend in Garland, Texas. The show was at the Curtis Culwell Center, had 4,032 fans, which is way more than AEW had the last time that they were there. Paul Levesque even tweeted before the show, encouraging people to go to the pay-per-view. TNA also had tapings in San Antonio this week. And of course, Saturday night main event is there tomorrow. So Meltzer says that's no coincidence. There's WWE talent and officials at these TNA shows. Apparently, this allegiance is likely that WWE wants to make TNA the number 2 promotion. Recent TNA shows have drew better than the recent AEW tapings. And WWE would likely want to work with TNA and have a lot of control over the company and make them number 2. have the number two quote unquote competition, even though they're working together. Because it's better to have TNA number two with a very tight working allegiance than AEW, which is more, in theory, legit competition. Although at this point, they're not really that much competition as far as popularity wise. They're miles apart. Uh, Meltzer also believes WWE could possibly own them down the line, as they do most companies that they work with. They end up owning them. Josh Alexander and Jordan Grace are both apparently done with TNA. Jordan Grace is very likely going to be full time with WWE. In All Elite Wrestling news, they have been canceled by the TV station Unamas in Mexico. They never got any type of rating on this station. Apparently, according to Meltzer, AEW has not been a moneymaker up to this point. They lost $30 million in 2023, according to reports. People are saying $40 million in 2025. Meltzer is saying that they have a current TV deal that is supposed to make them profitable in theory the next 3 years. They have until around late 2026 to turn things around, because that is when talk of a new TV deal renewing is going to start. So they got about 2 years to make some major changes, but they don't seem to be doing anything in the right direction, to be perfectly honest with you. The locker room also seems like a mess. Regarding Britt Baker, Meltzer says there's a lot of talk about dressing room issues. Wade Keller in the Pro Wrestling Torch also did a report on this. There was issues with her, MJF, and Alicia Atout backstage months ago. Here's a question. Speaking of AEW money wasting, I like Alicia. She's worked for GNW. I know she's with MJF now. She's talented. What has she done? Like I personally, I think she's been signed for months and months and months, and I haven't personally seen anything of her in AEW. Did they just hire her as a favor to MJF? The only thing I'm hearing about is did they just hire her to stir up the heat backstage? Because it seems like that's all that's happened with her so far. The only reports I've heard, and I'm not saying she's not talented, but it's like, is she actually doing anything other than the heat backstage with Britt Baker? Apparently, Britt Baker also has broke up with Adam Cole, another guy that has seemingly lost all buzz at this point. Conan reported that she cheated on Cole, which she has denied. She's also had past behind the scene issues with Thunder Rosa. Britt Baker was the initial top woman in AEW and is believed to still have a few years left on her contract. The good thing about her is, with them not using her, she can get whatever massive contract she has. And if she wants to still work as a dentist, she can also be a dentist. But I think she stopped doing that once she started making the absolute massive AEW money. Ray Phoenix has posted a picture of himself in a straitjacket as if he's being held hostage by AEW. He's still getting paid hundreds of $1,000s a year. They're just not using him. Ricky Starks asked for his release and has also been turned down. The thing about holding on to people like that is it doesn't seem to be that good business, and it seems very petty, like taking all the Ray Phoenix merchandise off the shelves. Like, what do you end up doing with that merchandise? Just throwing it out? I hope you at least give it to the homeless. But like, to me, are Phoenix and Ricky Starks really gonna be the next Steve Austin or Hulk Hogan if you just let them go to WWE? Are they worth paying hundreds of thousands to sit at home? And it makes Tony Khan look like kind of bitter and wasteful with money to do that, and to have these guys complaining publicly, and they're still with the company. I don't think the benefit outweighs the negative of keeping them under contract. I would just let them go. I don't know. Doesn't make any sense to me. They're pushing an angle right now where the 57-year-old Jeff Jarrett is a contender for the title for John Moxley's. I guess John Moxley is back world champion, and they want imagine a 57-year-old. I know wrestling is predetermined. People like to shove that in our faces all the time now. But really, does anyone want to see a 50s unless it's The Rock, who's extremely popular and still at one of his peaks in popularity in his 50s? Do we really want to see Jeff Jarrett, who's far from his popularity peak as a world champion at this point? Apparently, AEW talent has been asked to do indie shows. And I have heard this myself too from indie promoters. A lot of the, and this for people that defend AEW saying that they're good for the wrestling business, it has been terrible for indie wrestling. Terrible for indie wrestling. Indie wrestling is far from at a high at this point. But apparently, for talent that are being asked to do indie shows, according to Dave Meltzer, some of them don't want to do them. They'd rather just sit at home and get paid. And others are asking for way more money than any indie promoter could realistically afford. And there's not a lot of money in indie wrestling. And I understand wrestlers saying that. But again, they just have so many people sitting under contract making money that it's bad for the independent business, because if they weren't under contract, they would have to make money on the indies. But the other bad thing is they're all getting so rich, it's eventually going to hurt the indies, and you're going to need more programs like the WWE ID programs to help the indies stay afloat, because there's just not that much money from indie gates. And people don't want to go to indie shows as much these days because there's no buzz about them. So, I mean, the breeding ground for wrestling is getting pretty low, and indie shows are also getting really bad. You're seeing stuff, ridiculously fake looking stuff with invisible wrestlers and pogo sticks and wrestling matches and people dressed up in ridiculous outfits. I don't know. It's just a joke. Everyone's probably seen that thing of the guy dressed up like Jesus in the ring performing magic religious stuff on wrestlers. I mean, that's insulting to religion and wrestling to me. I mean, some people might find that funny, but most people find that stupid, and it's not going to make them ever want to go to see wrestling. It just people see that and it's like, oh my god, wrestling is becoming so stupid. Why would I ever watch this? Apparently, as far as Alexa Bliss, just to go back to her, her contract is not been re-signed yet, so she's technically a free agent right now. But the belief is WWE are going to re-sign her. But there's someone. What if I was AEW? She would help get you a little bit of buzz. I would. You have so many wrestlers you could just release to help pay for stars like Alexa Bliss. Get rid of a bunch of your no-name wrestlers that you're paying a fortune to, and bring in someone like Alexa Bliss if I were them. But I have a feeling WWE is too smart to let someone like her go. I would say Rhea Ripley's still the most popular, but Alexa Bliss is up there for sure with Tiffany Stratton too. It's the top women's wrestlers right now. Apparently, for the big People versus GCW event, the Hammerstein Ballroom last weekend. Here's what I don't understand. The Hammerstein Ballroom is listed to be able to hold 2,200 people. In 2006, ECW One Night Stand had a show there with almost 2,500 people. That's a legitimate sellout there. AEW recently did events there. Some of them had 1,491 fans, and they were calling that a sellout. That's a lot less than 2,500. GCW went there in 2022 and had 2,025 fans. So, how are they saying that they went there on January 19th and it was sold out for 1,761? I just don't like this whole thing of, oh, it's sold out for our setup. I mean, that's just ridiculous. I mean, makes no to me, it's not a real sellout. A real sellout would be around what ECW had back in 2006, 2,500. Anyways, that's still a good crowd for an independent wrestling show, but apparently the show went way too long, according to Meltzer, 5.5 hours. And a lot of the later matches got little to no reaction. And the title change they did at the end with Effie winning their title got no reaction. The most notable things from the show was a wrestler named Alley Catch got injured and broke two bones in her leg in her match, and the match had to be stopped. Almost 1,000 people at this point have donated over 50,000 to a GoFundMe to her. I wonder, like in Canada, I know a lot of American companies don't need to get insurance to put on wrestling. They don't get liability insurance. In Canada, where I've ran probably 300 wrestling events from 2006 to 2018, you always needed insurance. It's like a rule. And even before that, I helped Stampede Wrestling promote. They always needed insurance. It's weird that in the US, companies seemingly can have wrestlers injured on shows and they don't pay for their injuries. Because I would assume, since the person is having GoFundMe for injuries, it means that the company is not paying for the injuries. Can only assume that. The other interesting thing that happened on that show was PCO tried to break TNA's digital media title, which is actually the first I've even heard of that championship. Apparently, he's bitter that TNA did not re-sign him. He's 57 years old now. The funny thing about this is the thing is he tried to break it with a hammer, and all it did was bounce off a chair. So there was no actual damage done to the belt that I could see. TNA's response to this is they said that he used a replica belt and they are in possession of the actual championship belt. And Tommy Dreamer, who is part of the TNA creative team, said, quote, I was told what happened when I got off the plane and was like, okay, guess he went crazy. Let's move forward and pivot, end quote. So there you go. I'll just go into some of your comments. For PCO, I mean, I'll say one last thing about him. He told me back when Ring of Honor signed him, back when he was at his like peak of his little resurgence with his Frankenstein gimmick, AEW hadn't opened yet, but they were in the process of opening. He was friends with Joey Janela, who helps run GCW, which explains why he's back in the GCW fold. And at that point, Joey Janela was close with AEW, and it seemed like he was going to get an opportunity in AEW, but he didn't want to wait for that. He signed with Ring of Honor. Ultimately, with AEW keeping all of these older wrestlers under contract and still hiring more older wrestlers, maybe he'll still have a chance. I think their roster is really bloated to pick up a guy like PCO at this point, but anything's possible. But in the end, he would have made way more money in AEW, and they seem to hold on to wrestlers a lot longer overall. But I mean, I could see it from both. I understand why PCO is bitter about it, but I understand TNA too. They're now kind of a feeder system to WWE, working with Triple H and Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels had past issues with PCO that are well documented, and it's not like WWE is gonna take him back at this point. And again, he's not actually at one of his peaks in hotness right now. The whole Frankenstein thing peaked actually around the time that he had that match with Gunther that helped get Gunther hired. So he's done great for himself, and I wish him the best. Hello to you from the Philippines, Walter. I disagree. You could not pay me enough to do that. She is grotesque, very grotesque. Ivan, yeah, the backstage gossip is all that I care about for AEW at this point. It seems like there's always a lot of bizarre stuff going on in the locker room back there. Walter, how did Conan know that about Adam Cole? Well, Conan has a lot of connections in wrestling. She's denying it, but Conan knows a lot of behind the scenes talk in wrestling. So who knows? I don't know Conan that well. I've only interviewed him one time. I met him once. The second time I wrestled for TNA, I met him backstage. Never had any issues with him. But I don't know. I don't know. All I'm reporting is what he said. So take that how you want. Make sure you check out my interview with Lance Von Erich if you haven't already, that I posted in full this week. Someone says Shawn Michaels could be the new Eugene. I don't know if I get that. Good morning from Massachusetts. Good morning to you. Home of Kevin Sullivan. Speaking of Eugene, Jack Kilby is supposed to be interviewing him on here on the Hannibal TV live in a couple of days, so stay tuned for that.